Muhammad Ali walked into a Philadelphia pawn shop in 1973 looking for a watch. What he saw hanging on the wall behind the counter made him stop breathing. A pair of red Everlast boxing gloves, signed, with his own signature, his own handwriting, his own name, except Ali had no memory of ever signing them. The shop owner said a man sold them last week, described exactly where Ali signed them, when it happened, who was in the room, details only Ali should know. Ali bought the gloves without asking questions. But that night, when he examined them closely, he realized they weren't fake. The signature was real, which meant somewhere in his past, Ali signed these gloves and completely forgot. The question that kept him awake, what else had he forgotten? Muhammad Ali walked into a Philadelphia pawn shop in 1973 looking for a watch. It was early afternoon, middle of the week. The kind of grey October day where the sky looked like it couldn't decide whether to rain or just stay heavy and threatening. Ali had been in Philadelphia for a speaking engagement the night before, had some time before his flight back to Chicago, decided to walk around, kill a few hours. He wasn't famous for being on time, never had been. Watches didn't mean much to him. He showed up when he showed up. But he liked the idea of a nice watch, something heavy, something that felt expensive on his wrist. So when he saw the pawn shop on a side street off-market, he went in. The bell above the door rang when he pushed it open. Inside smelled like old cigarettes and metal polish. Glass display cases lined the walls, jewelry, coins, cameras, tools, the usual pawn shop inventory, random items that people had sold when they needed money more than they needed possessions. An older man stood behind the counter, white, maybe 60, wearing a cardigan sweater and reading glasses that hung on a chain around his neck. He looked up when Ali walked in, did a double take, recognition flashing across his face. "Muhammad Ali," the man said. Not a question, a statement. Ali nodded, smiled that smile. "Just looking around." "Take your time," the man said. But he kept watching, the way people always watched Ali, like they couldn't quite believe he was real. Like if they looked away, he might disappear. Ali walked along the display cases, looked at the watches. Nothing special. Timex, Bulova, a few Seikos, working man's watches. Nothing that caught his eye. He was about to leave when something on the wall behind the counter made him stop. Boxing gloves, red leather, Everlast brand, hanging from a nail, old, used. The leather cracked in places, tape residue on the wrists where someone had wrapped them years ago, and on the left glove, written in black marker, was a signature. Muhammad Ali. Ali stared at the gloves, felt something cold move through his chest. The signature wasn't printed, wasn't a label, it was handwritten, in marker. The way Ali signed things, the way his hand moved, the specific loops and slants of his letters, the exact pressure and flow. It was his signature. But Ali had never seen these gloves before in his life. He walked closer to the counter, pointed at the gloves. "Where'd you get those?" The shop owner turned, looked at the wall. "The boxing gloves." "Yeah." The man reached up, took them down, brought them to the counter, set them in front of Ali. "Guy sold them to me last week," the owner said, "brought in a whole box of stuff. These were in there." Ali picked up the left glove, the one with the signature, held it close, examined it. The handwriting was unmistakable. The way he wrote the M in Muhammad, the way the A in Ali connected to the L, the exact style he'd been using since he changed his name in 1964. This was his signature, no question. But he had no memory of signing these gloves. "What else did he say?" Ali asked. His voice was quiet, controlled, but something was happening inside him. Something like panic. The shop owner adjusted his glasses, said you signed them back in 1970, March or April, Detroit. Some gym, after you finished training. Said there were 3 people there, you, him, and 2 other guys he was with. Ali felt his throat tighten. Detroit, 1970. That was 3 years ago. He'd been in Detroit plenty of times, training, appearances, interviews. But this specific moment, this gym, this signing, he had no memory of it. "Did he say which gym?" Ali asked. The owner thought for a moment. "Kronk." "Yeah, Kronk Gym. Said you were there working with someone, preparing for a fight. Kronk Jim. Ali knew it, had trained there a few times. Emmanuel Steward's place. Good gym, serious fighters. But signing gloves there? March 1970? Nothing. He say anything else? Said you were in a good mood that day, laughing, talking about the fight. Signed the gloves because he asked. Didn't charge him or nothing. Just signed them and handed them back. Ali turned the glove over in his hands, looked at the stitching, the wear patterns, the age of the leather. Everything about them looked legitimate. Used gloves from the early 70s. The right era, the right brand, the right condition. And the signature was real, not a copy, not a stamp. Real ink, real pressure, real handwriting. His handwriting. How much? Ali asked. The owner looked surprised. You want to buy them? Yeah. Well, the man hesitated, clearly trying to figure out what to charge. He sold them to me for 50. I was going to ask 100, but since it's you, I'll give you 300, Ali said. The owner's eyebrows went up. $300. Cash. Sold. Ali pulled out his wallet, counted out $300 in 20s and 50s. Set the money on the counter, picked up both gloves, held them against his chest. The shop owner counted the money, smiled. Pleasure doing business with you, champ. Ali nodded, walked out of the shop. The bell rang again as he left. Outside on the street, Ali stood there holding the gloves. People walked past. A few recognized him, pointed, whispered. But Ali didn't notice. He was staring at the signature on the left glove. His own name, his own hand, written in a moment he couldn't remember. He walked back to his hotel, went up to his room, set the gloves on the bed, sat down next to them. For a long time he just looked at them, trying to pull up the memory, trying to see it. Detroit, Kronk Jim, March 1970. 3 people, signing these gloves. Nothing came. Ali picked up the left glove again, held it under the lamp, examined the signature from every angle. Looking for something, anything that would prove it wasn't his. But it was. He knew it was. The way he knew his own face in the mirror. This was his handwriting. His hand had held a marker and written these letters on this glove. He just didn't remember doing it. Ali thought about that, really thought about it. How does someone forget signing something? It wasn't a small thing, signing boxing gloves. People asked him all the time. He signed thousands of things over the years. Photos, programs, gloves, robes, random scraps of paper, most of it blurred together. But usually he remembered the contexts, the places, the general situations. But this, nothing. He tried to think back to March 1970. What had he been doing? He'd fought Oscar Bonavena in December of 1969, won that. Then what? Preparing for Joe Frazier. That was March 1971. So in early 1970, he would have been training, doing exhibitions, building toward that fight. Detroit made sense. He'd been there, trained there, done press there. But this specific moment, Kronk Jim, signing gloves, 3 witnesses, was completely gone from his memory. Ali set the glove down, stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Philadelphia, the city moving below him. Cars, people, life continuing like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. He was 31 years old, in his prime, sharp, alert. His memory was good. He could recall fights round by round, could remember conversations from years ago, could quote things people said to him in 1960, but he couldn't remember signing these gloves 3 years ago. That scared him. Ali turned away from the window, looked at the gloves on the bed. Then he started thinking about other things, other moments that felt fuzzy, other gaps in his memory that he'd brushed off as unimportant. There was that interview in Los Angeles. Someone had mentioned it to him months later, described what he'd said. Who else was there? But Ali had no memory of it. He'd assumed the person was confused, mixing up events. But what if they weren't? There was the charity dinner in New York. People kept thanking him for coming, kept referencing things he'd supposedly said during his speech. But Ali couldn't remember giving a speech, couldn't remember most of that night at all. There was the training session in Miami. Someone had shown him photos later, him sparring, him on the heavy bag. Photos that were definitely him. Definitely that Jim. but the session itself was gone from his mind. At the time, Ali had chalked it up to being busy, to doing so many things that they all blurred together, to the normal forgetting that comes with a full life. But now, looking at these gloves, he wondered if it was something else. He walked back to the bed, picked up both gloves, examined them closely. The right glove was unmarked, just worn red leather, but the left glove had his signature, and underneath the signature, very faint, barely visible, were some other marks. Scuff marks, dirt, the kind of wear that comes from actual use. These weren't display gloves, these were fighting gloves. Someone had worn these, trained in these, hit things with these. Had Ali worn them, or had someone else owned them and just asked him to sign them? The shop owner said Ali signed them after training, which implied Ali wasn't wearing them. Someone else was, someone who'd asked Ali to sign them afterward. That made sense, except Ali couldn't remember who that person was. Couldn't remember their face, their name, anything about them. Just gone. Ali sat back down on the bed, set the gloves beside him. He thought about his father, Cassius Clay Sr. The man had started showing signs of memory problems in recent years, forgetting names, repeating stories, getting confused about timelines. Ali's mother said it was just age, 60 years old, normal forgetting. But Ali had noticed it too, and it had worried him. Now he wondered if it ran in the family, if whatever was happening to his father was starting to happen to him too. At 31, the thought made his hands shake. He picked up the phone, called Angelo Dundee, his trainer, his corner man, the person who'd been with him through almost everything. Angelo answered on the third ring. "Yeah? Angelo, it's me. Champ, what's going on? I need to ask you something. Shoot." Ali looked at the gloves. "Were we in Detroit in March 1970? Angelo was quiet for a second, thinking. "Detroit? March 1970? Yeah, we were there for a couple days. You did some press, some training. Why?" "Kronk Gym." "Yeah, we trained at Kronk. Emmanuel let us use the facility. You sparred with a couple of his guys. Good work." Ali felt his chest tighten. "Do you remember me signing anything that day?" "Signing? Man, you sign stuff every day. Photos, programs, whatever people put in front of you." "Boxing gloves specifically?" Angelo thought about it. "Boxing gloves? At Kronk? I don't... Wait, yeah. Actually, yeah. Some guy had a pair of Everlasts. Red ones. Asked you to sign them. You did. Signed the left one. I remember because he was real happy about it. Kept thanking you." Ali felt like the room was tilting. "Do you remember what the guy looked like?" "Man, that was 3 years ago. I barely remember last week." "Why? What's this about?" Ali didn't answer right away, just sat there holding the phone, trying to process what Angelo had just confirmed. It happened. The signing happened. Angelo remembered it, which meant it was real. But Ali didn't remember it at all. "Champ, you there?" "Yeah," Ali said quietly. "I'm here." "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking about something." "You sure?" "I'm sure, thanks, Angelo. Anytime." Ali hung up. He sat there on the bed for a long time, the gloves next to him, his signature staring up at him. Proof of a moment that existed for everyone else but was completely erased from his own mind. And that's when the real fear set in. Not just fear about forgetting this one moment, but fear about what else might be gone. What other pieces of his life had disappeared without him noticing? What other moments had he lived through and lost? Ali thought about all the punches he'd taken, thousands of them, sparring, fights, years of getting hit in the head by the hardest punchers in the world. Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier, George Foreman. All of them landing shots that would have killed normal men. Ali had always believed he was too fast to take serious damage. Too smart, too defensive. He slipped punches, rolled with them, made them miss. But some got through, some always got through. And maybe they'd done more damage than he wanted to admit. Maybe they were taking pieces of his memory, little by little, moment by moment, until one day he'd wake up and not know who he was. The thought terrified him. Ali stood up, walked to the bathroom, looked at himself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, same Muhammad Ali the world knew. But inside, something had shifted. Some certainty had cracked. He'd always believed his mind was his greatest weapon. His ability to think, to strategize, to remember, to learn. That's what made him different. That's what made him great. But if his memory was failing, if pieces of his past were disappearing, then what did that mean for his future? Ali went back to the bedroom, picked up the gloves, held them against his chest. He decided right then that he wouldn't tell anyone about this, wouldn't mention the forgetting, wouldn't admit that he'd lost a piece of his own history, because admitting it made it real, made it scary, made it something he'd have to deal with. Better to pretend everything was fine, better to smile and keep moving, better to be Muhammad Ali, the greatest, the man who never forgot anything, who remembered every fight and every opponent and every moment, even if it wasn't true anymore. Ali put the gloves in his suitcase, zipped it closed, packed the rest of his things. That night he flew back to Chicago, went home, put the gloves in a closet, didn't look at them again for months. But he thought about them all the time. Thought about the moment he couldn't remember, the 3 witnesses, the gym, the man who owned the gloves, all of it existing in other people's memories but not his own. And he started paying attention to other gaps, other moments that felt fuzzy or missing. Started writing things down, keeping notes, trying to document his life so that if more pieces disappeared, he'd have a record. But the fear never left. The knowledge that something was wrong, that his mind, his greatest weapon, was starting to fail him. Years later, long after Ali retired, long after the Parkinson's diagnosis, someone asked him what scared him most about his condition. Ali didn't hesitate. Forgetting, he said. His voice was soft, slow. The disease had taken his volume, his speed, but not his honesty. Forgetting what? The interviewer asked. Everything, Ali said. Forgetting who I was, what I did, the people I loved, the fights I won, all of it, just gone. The interviewer asked if he'd always been afraid of that. Ali nodded slowly. Yeah, long time. Before the shaking started, before the diagnosis. I knew something was wrong, knew I was losing pieces. When did you first notice? Ali thought about that. Thought about the pawn shop in Philadelphia, the red Everlast gloves, the signature he didn't remember making. But he didn't say that, didn't tell that story. Some things were too personal, too frightening, too close to the truth he didn't want to face. Don't remember, Ali said, and smiled slightly, the irony not lost on him. The interviewer laughed, thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. Muhammad Ali genuinely couldn't remember when he first noticed the forgetting, because the nature of forgetting is that you don't always know what you've lost. The gloves stayed in his closet for years, moved from house to house as Ali's life changed, from Chicago to Los Angeles to Michigan, always packed away, never displayed, never mentioned. Sometimes Ali would find them, moving boxes, cleaning out storage, and he'd see them and remember that day in Philadelphia, remember the feeling of holding evidence of a moment he'd lived through but couldn't recall. And every time, it scared him just as much as the first time, because those gloves represented something bigger than a forgotten signing. They represented the beginning of understanding that his mind wasn't invincible, that the punches had consequences, that greatness came with a cost. Muhammad Ali paid that cost for the rest of his life. Not in the ring, but in the quiet moments, the private moments, the moments when he tried to remember something and found nothing but empty space where a memory should be. The gloves were proof that he'd been there, proof that he'd lived that moment, proof that it happened, even if he couldn't remember it. And sometimes, late at night, Ali would wonder how many other moments were gone, how many other pieces of his life had disappeared without leaving evidence behind. No gloves, no photos, no witnesses, just absence, just the hollow feeling of reaching for a memory and finding nothing. That was the real fight, not against Liston or Frazier or Foreman, against his own mind, against time, against the slow erasure of who he'd been. And unlike the fights in the ring, this was one Muhammad Ali couldn't win. The gloves knew that, had known it since 1973. They'd been waiting in that pawn shop, waiting for Ali to find them, waiting to show him the truth he didn't want to see, that he was forgetting, that he'd always been forgetting, and that one day there might be nothing left to remember at all.